Hi, and welcome to Unit number 9, Supervision and Training. I am just going to go through the PowerPoint here to make sure that I catch all of the important aspects of what this unit has. But just what I want to reiterate is that we've done the orientation. So to get a perspective on training and supervision, the orientation is a macro, and we're going to go to a micro. So the macro overview of the whole organization, the org chart, budget, where that comes from, and so we're describing the whole organization, its mission, vision, values, and now we're going to take the volunteer and put them into a specific role and talk about training and supervising in that role. When we look at that, we're also looking at the spectrum on which positions sit. So we've got the position of an episodic volunteer. They're coming out for one day once a year, and we got a volunteer that comes in every week. They might help us with our bookkeeping. They might help us with fundraising, so they have access to money. They might help us with reception, so they have access to the client files and information. They also might help us with volunteer reference checks, and so they have information that's about employees maybe, but definitely other volunteers. So there's a huge level of responsibility in there. So when we look at all that responsibility, that's where we're going to take the training, and we're going to say, this episodic volunteer who's selling daffodils 2 hours once a year is not going to need a lot of training. They will need some training, not a lot of training. But if I come over here and I look at a volunteer who has a lot of responsibility, a lot of access to information, they're going to need a lot of training and maybe some supervision, because they're going to need to feel supported until they're quite comfortable in their role. So that's what training and supervising in a nutshell is supposed to do for them. So while we're setting up that training and supervision, one of the things that I've incorporated into my interviews is the question, how can volunteer services best support you as a volunteer in your role here at the hospital? So I often get pauses and puzzled looks like, ooh, what kind of question is she asking there? Right out of left field. So I always have to explain it again. And the explanation is, what can I provide to you that will help you learn your role? How do you learn? And then they answer me. So most people want to have a mentor that they can follow, and also somebody that will answer their questions. Most people do not like to learn from a book. So just give them a book and say, read that and you'll know exactly what you're doing. Most people don't like that. And they also will appreciate feedback. So when we're talking about training the volunteer, it might be, whether it's in, I'm not saying put it in the interview, but definitely a question, how is the best way for you to learn? So within the PowerPoint, we've got a section there on Martin Cowling is talking a bit about who he likes to reference in terms of, a theorist, how people learn. And so I would encourage you to read through that. If not, read it entirely. Certainly give it a glance over. But people do learn in different ways, and they do have their likes and dislikes or benefits from learning in certain ways. So I would factor that into a conversation with them anyways. The supervising piece is a little bit harder. Don't think that you always have to use a staff person. You don't. In fact, it is more popular for volunteers to learn from other volunteers. So I try to make other volunteers mentors to new volunteers, and across the board, not just for me, but trends and surveys and certain articles that I've read, that seems to be the most popular way to do it. It is hard to get staff to be the supervisor, but let's take the staff person that has approached you and said this would be a great volunteer role, but I need these requirements, and they will have these responsibilities, and they will perform these tasks. And then that person is with you in the interview. So they say, yes, that volunteer answered all the right questions. They were wonderful. I think they'd be a great fit. So they were in the interview with you. And then I think they should be the person that's going to train them, because they know the most about the job, and they've had that vested interest in following this process all the way through. So I wouldn't see why they don't want to continue, because they've invested so much time in this position and in this person who's made the application to be a volunteer. Having said that, staff do sort of respond negatively and say, I have enough on my plate, I'm busy enough, I don't want to be a supervisor of volunteers, which is understandable. So I did create a document, and all they have to do is say 1 out of 5, the volunteer is, very responsible, the volunteer interacts with patients well, etc. So I made this document, they can check things off, and that's fine. And then I can have a conversation with the volunteer. So when you're talking about supervising, you don't want things to go on too long. So you might want to make an initial contact effort after they have done a few hours in that role. And then, of course, sort of the standardized 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, you contact them and you get together face to face or even email. So I just send out an email. How are things going? I'm here, open door policy. If you need to talk, concerns or issues, let me know. And then I usually just get an email back. No, I'm enjoying my role. Or they say, I would like to switch into a new role, but I'm happy where I am. But I was looking forward to being in this section of the hospital. And when I was onboarded, there were no openings. Are there any openings now? So the email just helps keep that line of communication open. Remember when you're fixing a budget that you want to make some allowances for training and training manuals. So you're just going to have a cheat sheet for your episodic volunteer, and then you're going to build a manual or a reference manual or a training manual that you can print up and give out to the volunteer who has that big responsible role. And so they can reference this all the time, or they can put notes in there or something like that. I did have a person in one of my classes, and all of her volunteers were off-site. They were virtual. They did things in different countries or in different provinces. And so she did all her training through webinars, and they you're e-learning, so it's not such a far-fetched idea, and she would connect with them that way. The orientation was done this way, so you can sign up to programs and pay for them, and volunteers, like a webinar or Zoom, which is free. And I've even had meetings with other people and other organizations in regards to volunteer management, and it's worked out quite well. So it just takes a little bit of time. Watch a few Google videos. That's what I did. How to make a video for your e-learning class. And you can send me in how I'm doing so far. So supervising long distance, just connecting with them. And again, depending on how long distance they're in another country, you certainly can't go and have coffee with them. But if it's reasonable, you could meet them halfway and have a coffee. Face to face is always nice. And more people, I would not factor age into technology. I've seen people who never grew up with technology and are amazing on their iPhones. So I wouldn't factor age into that. But face-to-face is definitely much better. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody's orientation PowerPoints. I love this assignment because I always get great feedback that students found it was quite helpful, that it was something they've always wanted to do and never found the time to do. So it's a very relevant assignment. It's not something that you're going to do and then sort of forget about. It's actually kind of useful. So the same with the recruitment plan. Can't wait to see assignment 3. I'm sure everybody's just a buzz waiting for that one. But I am looking forward to reviewing them because I find that everybody puts so much work into it, and learning about all these organizations is really fun for me. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. Looking forward to doing that, uploading your mark so that it makes everybody happy. And I will see everybody in Unit 10.